a kind of once every month luncheon. We try and keep it on the third Saturday of each month. We'll do that upcoming in April as well as in May. And then in the summer, we'll have a summer social event, and then we'll be back together in the fall for monthly events as well. But there's a flyer on your table for next month's event. We're bringing in a gal named Amanda Hockmuth, who is a graduate of the Denver Street School, who is a ministry partner of ours. And so Denver Street School is a ministry we've been supporting here at Cherry Creek for many years. And Amanda is a graduate of that program. And she's going to come in to share a little bit about what the Lord has done in her life through that ministry. And even indirectly, in a way, our support of that ministry, what that has meant to her, and to give us a little update on the Denver Street School and how they're doing over there as well. So I hope you can make it for that as well. We'll have a luncheon event, 11:30 to 1:30, April 17th. That's a Saturday. So hopefully you can make that. Keep your eyes peeled for the sign up for that on our Week at Creek, as well as our website. I'm going to bring up Nancy McClanahan to talk about what these blue baskets on each of your tables is for as well. So here you go, Nancy.
Thanks, Phil. It's been such a pleasure to work with Phil as our new coordinator. It really makes it a lot of fun because he's so young and he's so handsome, and we keep trying to find him a wife, but I think he might be doing well on his own. But anyhow, just as a little bit of a follow-up with Amanda coming next week, as you know, we've been doing a fundraising type of thing or a gift type of thing every time we get together as a little outreach. And Denver Street School has a lot of needs for school supplies and so forth. And so when you respond next month to sign up for this luncheon, in your response, there will be a list of the things that they need, and we ask that you would bring something to share with the Denver Street School. It's a really neat program, so I'm hardly wait to have her share with us what is going on there. But for today, once again, we're collecting money to buy school uniforms for the children in Ghana. And so those little blue baskets, or there's some non-blue baskets on your table, tells a little bit about it. And we just ask that you would reach in your pocket a little bit deeper. Last month, we actually collected enough to send 41 uniforms to these kids, which I think is pretty amazing. But you guys are so generous. So thank you so much for reaching in and sharing what God has given to you.
Thank you, Nancy. Can we give Nancy a hand just for her organization of all of this as well? And I think she gives me way too much credit, but that's just my own opinion. Yes, well, thank you guys for being here today. We were actually going to have another speaker come in. Her name is Penelope Carlavato. She was unable to make it today because she lives up in South Dakota, and the difficulty with weather and the storm last week. She was unable to make it down here this week, but we were able to find Jamie in the 11th hour to fill her place. So without any further ado, I'm going to welcome Jamie up, and would you give her a hand as she comes up and speaks?
Hey, can y'all hear me well? Okay. Get myself organized here. Well, thank you for letting me come eat lunch with you and on this beautiful, beautiful day. It's so gorgeous outside, so after this we'll all go out and get some sunshine. All right, well, a brief description of myself. Well, this is very exciting actually for me to be here because your church has been my mom and dad's home church for many, many, many years. And my mother, Janet Hannah, is with me today. Oh, there she is. Right, so this is a very special connection. So when my good friend Penny was unable to come speak with you, I knew that this was definitely God blessing me with a day to come share some time with you. So a brief introduction of myself. I am an author and an artist, and I'm also an educator. I teach art at Denver Christian, and I've been teaching for, my goodness, it was 22 years. I retired for 3, and then all of a sudden I'm back teaching again. I'm not sure how that happened. So that was a very short-lived retirement. And I also teach at Colorado Christian University some of their arts classes, arts and humanities. So I wear kind of several different hats. I'm also a mother to 3 sons. My youngest, my goodness, is 20 now, 20, 22, and 26. And I'm also a mother-in-law. My daughter-in-law, Kaylee, is over there. And my oldest son is in the Army. They live in Germany. So she gets the award for traveling the furthest. She came all the way, no, she was here visiting. So it's really an extra blessing that she gets to join in today. And so I'm obviously a daughter and a sister, and I wear many different hats, but my most important is that I am a child and a follower of Jesus Christ, and so this is a tremendous honor to spend this afternoon with you. All right, so I'm going to be speaking and sharing with you about a very special book. This is my 3rd novel, so I am a fiction writer, and Seasoned has a very special place in my heart. So I have a PowerPoint that I'll take you through just so you can see some of the visuals and how this book came to be and some very special themes that are interwoven in this book. All right, so I think we might dim the lights. Are we able to dim them down just a little bit? That'd be great. There we go. Oh, and before I jump into this, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the storyline of the book as well, but on the back of that card that's at your table, it does have a description of the actual fictitious version of the book, and of course a bookmark, because you got to have bookmarks. You can never have enough. And then over on this table over here, at some point, do stop by and you'll understand as I go through the presentation why I have a bowl of flags. And hey, 4th of July will be here before we know it, right? But it's always a good day to fly the American flag, so help yourself to one of those. And there's also some special little bags that have Himalayan sea salt in them and a scripture that goes with these. And so that will all make a little more sense as I get going with the presentation. So some goodies over there to stop by and get afterward. Okay, so Seasoned. And I go by Jamie H. Mansfield because my maiden name, Hannah, but also because when I married my husband, James Mansfield, we've been married for 30 years, I got Jane Mansfield all the time because my spelling, Jayme, and so I've had numerous people say, oh, you're the famous Jane Mansfield. And I said, no, and she's sadly not around to be here anymore. So therefore, that's why my middle initial is in all my books. Okay, so Seasoned. It's a vintage love story with a modern day flavor. And that tagline took some thinking and a lot of discussion with my publisher and editors. And originally this book was written as a time slip. So if you think of like The Notebook, Nicholas Sparks' The Notebook, how it would go back and forth in time. And it was initially written that way. And I actually liked it. It was a lot of work to put it into that format. But after a lot of discussion with my publisher, it was taken out of a time slip and put in, it's told from a contemporary time frame. But because the protagonists are both in their 80s, it obviously lends itself to a lot of history. And so therefore, the vintage love story with a modern day flavor. All right, and I just got news of this, so I had to add this slide in. It was just awarded the 2020 Illumination Gold Medal for exemplary Christian fiction. My books all have a very important theme of faith. It's not overt. My books are not preachy, but that's who I am, and we get that as believers that it's pretty hard to separate, even when you're telling fiction, it's hard to separate what's at the core of your heart. And so I'm also really excited that my books, they are read in the secular market and they're read in the Christian market. But this was really a big honor to get this. So authors have to do that every so often, get excited about that. Well, thank you. Okay, so here's where we get to the good stuff. So this book was inspired by a true love story. And I know some of you in this room know not only my mother, but also know Frank Romano. And they really did have quite a story. My mom and dad, so the real life story, my mother and father, Ralph Hanna, they were married for 56 years. Wonderful husband, wonderful father. And my father passed away back in 2007. And my mom was an extremely vibrant woman, and she was lonely. And I actually did. I kind of dared her to go on eHarmony. And she wasn't too excited about it for a while at all. And I said, come on, Mom, it's not to meet and get married, but just companionship. You're really an outgoing woman. You have so many interests and such. So she agreed to kind of a trial month subscription. And I was, in real life, kind of her ghostwriter. So don't tell eHarmony, because I'm sure we probably could still get in trouble for that. But so when she would get an email, she'd call, and I'd log into her account, and we'd get on the phone together and kind of giggle and laugh about some of the emails. And she'd respond, and nothing ever went really further than that. Well, unbeknownst to me, a gentleman just over in Lone Tree was really going through the same situation. He'd been married for 60 years. Beautiful, long marriage, 6 children. He had lost his wife recently, and actually just 6 months prior to my father passing away. And he was on eHarmony, kind of for the same reason. Well, she didn't tell me about this gentleman. She didn't call up her ghostwriter and tell me. But I did get a call, and she said, do you think it would be safe if I have coffee at 10 o'clock at Starbucks in Lone Tree with a gentleman? And I said, well, first of all, you didn't tell me about this, so I don't know who this is. But I said, yeah, I think it's okay. So they had been having an exchange of emails, and she was, 20 steps ahead of me. So they met, had a lovely coffee, which turned into a lunch, which then turned into a dinner the next evening, which then turned into a 12-year, wonderful, beautiful relationship. So it really is inspired by them. It's not that I planned to write a novel about them, but I witnessed in my family, my boys, Frank's family, his children, witnessed this incredible, really extra decade plus of an amazing life together, and how they treated each other with such respect, and very importantly, that they treated their prior spouses and all that history with a tremendous amount of respect. And so it was really an incredible thing to witness. And as storytellers will do, we fiction writers, you get a little bug in your head and you can't seem to get rid of it, and so you have to write a story. So it's inspired by them, but again, being fiction, I had to come up with a lot of fictitious elements, and I'll touch upon a few of those. So the real Frank and the protagonist, the male protagonist in the book, Lou Rizzo, were both military. Colonel Frank Romano, served in World War II. He was in the 10th Mountain Division, Korean War, Vietnam War, and not having come from a military background, now my son's in the military, which I think is such a neat full circle, he would tell stories like I had never heard. And I had tremendous respect for Frank and his service to our country, and that's why, again, those flags are over there, and there's a little sign that says, please take a flag in honor of Frank Romano and all those who have served. And that is really heartfelt. Thank you. So this is one of the quotes, one of the excerpts from the book. It's a little small up there, so I'll read this from you. He slid his hand from the table, and perhaps stowing away his war stories for another day, we sat in silence for a moment, like perennials, waiting for the right time to sprout. Then he laughed, a beautiful sound that stirred my heart and confirmed I wasn't too old to get butterflies in my stomach. There's also a very important thread in this book of a mother-daughter relationship, actually a father and daughter relationship as well. So this is a picture of my mom and I, and this picture really is special to me. The book was released in October, just this last fall. And in October, my mom came to live at my home with my family, which she lives there now. She has quite a setup upstairs, a nice bedroom and kind of an apartment area. So we're very blessed to have her living with us. And just a little side note, Frank did pass away in June, so the real Frank Romano, not from COVID, but he was a week shy of his 96th birthday. So we miss him extremely, but life goes on as he would want it to as well. And so for us to be able to bring my mom, who just needed help and family around her now, she lives with us, and it's wonderful. So this was a picture when authors do this when their books arrive. You know, we rip open the box and take a picture with it, and it's always exciting. So here's a quote from this section. We pushed our bare feet against the wooden planks and moved back and forth in tandem, as if aligning our hearts and minds like mothers and daughters do. So in the book, there is a daughter who's actually a romance writer and a fun character. She and her mother have a very wonderful relationship in the book, but as fiction writers have to do, there has to be some neat plots woven in and conflicts and challenges for each of the characters. And so there is a tremendous character arc, not only for the two protagonists. Essie White is the 85-year-old woman, 82 in the book, and Lou Rizzo, and then her daughter as well. Another element that is present in all my books is the transforming power of art. Like I mentioned, I'm also an artist. I've had a studio in the Denver area for 25 years, I believe now. And so I teach art, I do my own art, and I kind of look through the lens, I suppose, of an artist when I write my books. They're very visual and descriptive, but I also think there's a lot of lessons in art. And so in each of my books, a thread of art is woven in. So here's a section. This is Essie, the protagonist. These are her section. And over the years, my passion for art had taught me that a painting is made more rich, interesting, and meaningful with the combinations of lights and darks. And so is life. And so there's a really interesting exchange between she and her daughter talking about art and seeing life through the lens of darks and lights. And if any of us go and squint at a painting in our homes or in the museums, or if we go and look at the beautiful mountainsides and we squint, that's kind of a fun trick when you're teaching people to paint, you can't have those light elements without those dark elements, and vice versa. And that's what gives depth and perspective and meaning to paintings, and also with life. And that's my mom's painting. She's a great artist. So she's lucky. She gets to come downstairs now and go in the studio and paint. Okay, so a lot of text up here, and this is a little bit of a summary, I suppose, what's on the back of the postcard that you have there. So when I'm writing a book. All my books have been inspired by truth and reality on many levels. But then being the storyteller, I flip it into fiction. So this is a reality turns to fiction. Essie White finds herself more alone and off-kilter than she could possibly imagine after the death of her husband of 56 years. But when her daughter and romance writer Allie LaFleur persuades Essie to give online dating a whirl with the agreement she will be her mother's correspondent ghostwriter, things begin to get interesting. Living in a nearby Colorado mountain town, Lou Rizzo is widowed after 58 years of marriage. A longtime Army veteran, Lou has lived an adventurous life and isn't about to call it quits, even though he shoulders a haunting incident he can't forget. But when a dare or perhaps fate brings Essie and Lou together, their paths converge, forcing them to decide what to do about their growing love and if it's worth revealing tragedies, lost dreams, fears, and a chance to love again. So I do a lot of book clubs. I love doing book clubs. And some of the people that may know my real mother, they'll say, oh my goodness, what is true in this story and what's not true? And I can fortunately say, if you have read the book or you pick up a copy to read, the real difficult conflicts, internal personal conflicts, external conflicts that happen in the story, thank goodness, they're all fictitious. So that's the good thing. But that's what makes good fiction. And I will say, though, that I am a happy ending kind of gal. So if you're wondering, it's not a spoiler. My books all end with a happy ending because, hey, I just think we need that in life. So it's a beautiful, beautiful story that does have a very hopeful, joyful, respectful ending to the story. But you do have to throw in those twists, and I won't give away the story, but it goes back in time, even though it's not a time slip. But the book is written in, and I've done this with all my books, I write from first person point of view, at least I have to this point, and my piece that's in progress is first person. And so the chapters alternate between the protagonists. And so I love to write that way because you're very, very much, it's called deep point of view for you writers out there. It really takes you into a very sensory, emotional, mental, even physical state of the characters. And, I guess I've probably one of those crazy authors that when a book's all done and you are done working on the manuscript and it's actually published, there is a little bit of sadness. You kind of think, wow, like I've been hanging out with these people this book took 3 years to write. My other book, Rush, 5 years, and my first book, 7 years. So you spend a lot of time with those people, whether they're good guys or bad guys. Okay, so the themes and some of the thoughts that really surround this book. Now, if this was a book club talk, obviously we'd be going down some of these paths and really sharing, favorite parts and challenges, etc. But this gives you an overview of, when you write a book, a lot of times people think there's one theme. I've yet to be able to really do that because I think life is it's layered in many themes. So, love knows no age. And that really resonated with me, and I'll share a little side story. When my agent was pitching this book, there were some publishers I was really excited about to work with, some new opportunities. Several of them turned the manuscript down because they said, we love the story, we love the premise, but the protagonists are too old. And I know, don't run out of the room now, don't throw things out, because I didn't say it. And they said, people want to read love stories about younger people. And that gave me even more fuel to, one, refuse to change the storyline, because they sometimes will ask you to do crazy things with your books. But I thought, you know what, that's so short-sighted. God created all of us to love from the moment, in utero to be loved. And obviously till our final day, and then we get to have a big love fest when we're all in heaven, right? So, I mean, it was just so, and these are wonderful publishers. These are actually, one of them was actually a Christian publisher, but I just thought, this story has to be published. And I have been so absolutely edified and thankful that when this book, the reviews it's gotten, and when I, again, do book clubs, whether it's a group of 20-year-olds reading this book or 80 plus, people relate. They may have parents that have lost a spouse or are in a long marriage or multiple marriage, whatever, but people relate to love from different vantage points of life. So I always like to share that because I thought love definitely knows no age. And then a second chance to love. Forgiveness, and that's just not of another person. This book is steeped in forgiveness of self and how not forgiving ourselves sometimes keeps us from the greater love with the Lord. And so there's a really beautiful thread throughout this book of faith and grace. So again, it was a real delight to write through these characters' lives. And then family, like I mentioned, there's many relationships. Mother, daughter, daughter, father, husband, wife, children, and those are the secondary characters, but they are so important to the story, and they're so fun to write into books. And then patriotism. I spoke of Frank, the real Frank Romano, but there's also elements of patriotism and love and respect for our country and its history. And those were, I was brought up that way with my mother and father, but then again, to hear Frank really tell of his military history and, whether you're military or not, but his true love for the country and what he went through to lead that kind of a life. So the questions are this. These are kind of the takeaways when people are reading this book. If given a second chance to love, would you take it? And there's not a right answer to that. For some people, it works, and it happens, and love comes along a second time, a different kind of love for a different season in your life. Therefore, the book Seasoned has many different layers of meaning in it. And then, could you forgive your worst enemy, even if it was yourself? And that's probably one of my favorite elements of the plot of this book. These characters, when you're developing a character in a book, you don't want a character just to stay the same. There's a big character arc, and whether they end up being better for it at the end or not, they change. And it's really fun to go along on a ride with characters on their journey. Okay, so I mentioned briefly that all my books have a painterly theme. In Seasoned, Essie is an amateur painter, a hobbyist. She has painted largely all her life really for her own relaxation, enjoyment, some fun canvas and cocktail or wine and art nights, with her girlfriends here and there. But there is a painting in the story that becomes a very key element to the plot that she painted long ago. And in Rush, that is a book about the 1893 Oklahoma land rush that was based on my great-great-grandmother's story. And fascinating book, told in a year's time period, steeped in history. Really, that's a whole other one. I'd love to talk to you about that book someday because the history is phenomenal. That one has an illustrative journalist from the Boston Globe that comes out to follow the race. And so that was a whole art thread of, in that case, a male protagonist and art through his eyes. And then Chasing the Butterfly, my debut novel, as an artist in the south of France and Paris in World War II up through actually 1960. So she's a professional artist, becomes a professional artist in that book. So again, the painterly theme, and thus my book covers are all very painterly. And there's a neat story behind these, because usually publishers, bless their heart, but they have their different departments of people. And as the author, they really don't want you telling them this is what the cover needs to look like. You can actually get in a lot of trouble for doing that. You have to be very careful. So, but I don't know how, but I was able to get away with it. So the first book has a beautiful painting, and a lot of people thought I've painted these covers. I haven't. They're actually painted by Kelly Berger, who is a local Colorado artist. Brushstrokes Gallery, it's been around forever, that group of painters. She's an old, close friend of mine, and she painted the cover for Chasing the Butterfly kind of on a fluke, and the publisher went with it, and the book sales for a debut book really shot up, and they paid a lot of, they attributed a lot of that to the cover. It was so beautiful. And so when Rush was coming out, they actually came to me and they said, hey, would that friend of yours paint the cover for Rush? And thank goodness she did. And it has a beautiful cover of the Oklahoma plains. And then, crazy story though, and this is why I wanted to share this part, with Seasoned, Kelly didn't know about this manuscript yet. I just hadn't had a chance to talk with her. And I went to one of her art shows, and it was a culinary theme. And I walked into her art show, and I'm not kidding, on display with many of her other paintings and other artists, I see this 12 by 12 of this vintage salt and pepper shaker. And I said, oh my goodness, that's the painting that she paints in the book. So I just gave away a little something of it. But I mean, I'm not kidding. That was my vision of it. And I said, did I tell you about this book? And she said, no, I don't even know what you've been working on. And that honestly was the picture in my mind. And she said, well, take it off the display and see what I've titled it. So I lifted it off, flip it over, and it's titled The Perfect Couple. Really, and so of course I bought it. She gave me the other originals I have in my home, but I said, I'm buying this quickly before anyone else can come into this show and buy this painting. So I called the publisher, I sent a picture to it, and I said, I know this is an unconventional book cover for a love story. That, you know, they wanted to have people walking down a beach holding hands or something, and I said, no, we have to use this cover. It is the cover. And so I'm thrilled with that they used it, that they trusted me on this. And plus, it's given all three of the books that painterly theme. So not a lot of people know that little story about it, so it's really special. So there's Kelly. I always like to throw her picture in there. People think we're sisters, even twins a little bit. But she has beautiful, beautiful artwork. And so it's made this whole publishing journey even that much more fun, that we share that together. Okay, so I actually have, it's very short. This is just under a minute. It's the book trailer. But I like to put this in presentations so you can kind of see what it was projected out when this book was being launched. And you know a little bit of the storyline now. So I'm going to push play on here, and hopefully the volume will be up. I'm going to try. Uh-oh, hold on. Oops. Am I doing something wrong with the volume? Hold tight. Got it up high. Isn't it nice to have a computer genius on hand? Okay, so that gave you a little flavor for it. It's always fun to put those book trailers together. And fortunately, there's all kinds of things you can do on your own computer now, so you don't have to spend a lot of money doing those, and your publisher is always really happy. So this is, we're going to actually go into a section of question and answer, but from the author standpoint about this, I mentioned that I do book clubs. So if any of you do end up reading the book, I do online book clubs. I've done a lot of those lately, and in person, of course. But it's a great book to dive into the storyline and really talk about the characters. And I've had some fascinating discussions with people. And there's always, fiction in particular always tends to bring out the storyteller and other people and weaving their own history and life experiences. So I'm always around to find me. I'm on my social media. You got to do all that stuff. It's funny, as a author, gone are the days or the big book tours and publishers doing all this marketing for you, unless you're the top of the New York Times bestselling list. So I do a lot of marketing in addition to trying to write and work on my next books that are coming up. And then actually I was sitting with a lovely woman I just got to meet at lunch today, and she had actually gone on my website and saw my artwork and learned a little bit about me. So that jamiehmansfield.com. There's book trailers. There's information about Rush. There's a really fun book trailer for that book, and a lot of the old historical pictures. There's more pictures for Seasoned of the real Frank and Janet, and a lot of neat things. There's actually book club questions that are being added on there as soon as I get those finished. Okay, so that's the presentation about Seasoned, and I hope that gave you something to think about. Even though we haven't read the book together and we weren't talking about the storyline per se, writing is really an amazing journey. I started, Chasing the Butterfly came out in 2014. So I started writing actually about the time my father passed away. It was 2007. And I was going through the Christian Writers Guild down in Colorado Springs with Jerry Jenkins. He's a phenomenal writing mentor, very tough. Oh boy, very humbling experience. So, but I got some very solid foundations writing way back then with a Christian faith-based worldview, which I really appreciate. And I attend a lot of writers' conferences. There was plenty canceled this year, of course, but the writing community is pretty interesting. And you really find that there's wonderful people out there cheering you on, and there's plenty of stories to go around for the whole world. No one has the corner on the book market. Well, it feels that way sometimes, but there's always stories to tell. So are there any questions or comments that I can ask or answer for you as far as the writing life, author life, this book, other books? Yes? Thank you. So Chasing the Butterfly, like I said, it's set in Paris and Provence. I actually wrote that book when I was a student in the Christian Writers Guild. And that book was very fascinating how it came to be. It was just off of assignments. One of my assignments was to create a character. And I thought, well, let's see. I'm an artist. I'm a woman. I've been to France a lot. I mean, that's how that came to be. So I started writing a character sketch and really put, it's funny, people will say, are you the characters in this book? And yes, you can't separate elements of just how you think and live and breathe and walk, but that's never what's in my mind when I'm writing. But anyway, so that book is a tale of, you meet her as a young girl with an American mother and a French father, and you follow her through her life as her paintings become highly sought after, yet she's created a series of secret paintings that are for her eyes only, that she believes kind of protects and seals the most important things in her life that she holds so dearly, and those are discovered, and then the whole book unravels from there. So it's a really beautiful story. A lot of people read that book, and whether they've been to that area of the world, they'll say, oh my goodness, I was in those poppy fields, or walking down the Champs-Élysées. So it's really a beautiful story. And so that book actually grew out of writing assignments, and how it gave me my start as a writer. My mentors through the Christian Writers Guild said, hey, you've got something here. Keep going. Turn it into a story. Go the whole mile with this. And I did, and I submitted it to a national first novelist contest, and it actually placed in the top 10, and so I was able to get an agent and a publisher, and God has an amazing way of opening doors. Rush, as I mentioned, is about my great-great-grandmother, and I grew up hearing about Oklahoma grandma. Larger-than-life woman, although in real life she was this little bitty woman and looked like Granny on the Beverly Hillbillies. And so for a long time I thought that's who she was. And my mom, we've had letters and deeds and documents, and I dug into all that stuff and had a heyday researching the land runs, fascinating component of our country's history. And a lot of that book is true, even some of the big twists and turns, but that's how big her life was. So she rode out as a young single woman, borrowed a horse, did the race, staked her claim, homesteaded, and taught school in a sod house. So she was a fascinating woman in real life, and the book really got to take that to another level. And then finally, my book that I'm working on is called Portrait of Deceit, and it is based on art forgery on Modigliani, the early 1900s Italian painter, and the protagonist is a world-renowned art forgery authenticator. And that book came to be because I actually met a woman, and that is her job, Colette Lall. She lives back east. She's fascinating. She looks like Jacqueline Onassis Kennedy, really classy, beautiful woman. And she has worked on investigations all over the world. I mean, we're talking like Matisse and the Biggies, and she and I have become very close friends, and she is my right-hand woman for my research on that book. So that's a lot of fun. And I thought I was going to have it all done with our lockdowns, and I don't know what's happened to my concentration this year. Is anyone else suffering with that this year? I thought I have all the time in the world, and I don't know what's wrong, but I'm going to finish that book. So thank you for asking that. Anyone else? Yes, uh-huh. I appreciate that. And I will say, though, that you never ask your mother to read your manuscript and tell you if there's any editing problems in it, because she'll say, oh, honey, it's just beautiful. It's perfect. I didn't see one thing wrong. And then, it goes to the copy editor, and they just shred it. And so never ask your mother. But she has been a very good cheerleader through this whole thing. Was there someone back there? Or? Oh, yes. She said, do I run into writer's block? I really don't. My biggest challenge, I have a lot of writing friends, author friends, who are very disciplined, and they write, 5 days a week, and they get up and they write, and no one can interrupt them. I live in a household, and this sounds like an excuse, but it is my excuse, with not only my mom's there now, but we have a full house with all this crazy COVID stuff. We have a whole slew of everyone living back at home. And my biggest challenge is just getting myself parked and do it. But I love to write in big, long blocks. So if anyone wants to send me away to their remote beach cottage, or I'll go in a heartbeat, because I've written a lot of my books isolated from people, and I will get up and write. It's light out, and I'll maybe get up to use the restroom, grab something to eat, and then it's dark. And I love to write that way. You get completely it's something, I can get in the zone when I paint, but there's something different about writing, that you get in this zone and you're in another world. So the ideas are there, and it's actually kind of I don't want to say frustrating, because I really feel very blessed to write stories, but they hang out in your head, and you want to get them out. I'm constantly thinking characters and stories and the other books I want to write, and so it takes discipline, though. Yes? Yeah, it kind of depends. With Rush, because I knew, it was a real setting, a real historical event, the time period, I did read all kinds of nonfiction books with Rush. I checked, boy, did I ever learn about the railroad system back in those days and how it crisscrossed around the country, just rail times, maps. How did she get from Missouri to Oklahoma? I did a lot of reading before I started writing that book. With this book, I actually interviewed my mom and Frank. I sent them questions, had a lot of talks with Frank on the phone because he could talk, and gathered all this information about them and their lives and their meetings. And when you read Season, there's so much truth in it, the little innuendos, what they were wearing when they first met. And there's a beautiful scene of them sitting down at the coffee shop, and he's wearing a gray sweater, the zip up, and describes what Essie's wearing. And they sit down at a coffee shop, and even though in the book it's not a Starbucks, but he lifts out a red rose. And Frank did that on their first date in real life. So there's lots of truth so you say research, that was a softer side of research. Now when I'm writing and I come across something that I'm not sure I know historically or accurately, I'll put a big long line, just, a big stretch of line, knowing that I need to go back and research that. But if I'm in the zone, I want to keep going, because boy, you can get on, it's so wonderful. You can get on these crazy bunny trails and you learn all kinds of things. Rush, I learned all kinds of things about all the botanicals of what was growing in Oklahoma in that area and that certain time of the year, and medicinal things and about the Native Americans. And it was fascinating. Not all that makes it in the book, but the research component is really fun. So I really am a historical fiction author, I think, at heart. Even though this one's told contemporary, I'm fascinated by history. Yes? When I write, I think it's true when people say you become more of a morning person. I used to write at night. Now I'm definitely more fresh in the morning, and that's when I need to be writing. First thing, before my head gets cluttered with to-do lists and paying bills and anything else and distractions, I love to write in the morning for sure. And one kind of a side note on writing, and maybe you've heard these terms, kind of the two main types of writers. There's pantsters that write by the seat of their pants, that don't outline their books, that just kind of know a storyline, a seed, a starting point. You might know where the story's going to end, and you just go and you write. And then there's plotsters that outline their books heavily. They know every plot twist and turn and character sketches, and then they go back and kind of piece their book together. I am definitely a pantster. I sit down and I go. I know Chasing the Butterfly has an opening scene of a little girl running down a dirt road in Provence, chasing after her mother's car. I have a beautiful relationship with my mom, and she actually used to always say, now you tell people at book clubs, don't you, that we really like each other, and I didn't, leave the family like the mother does in this book. I don't want to give away the book, but so yes, we do. But so scenes come to you, and you can't get it out of your head. Rush, the opening scene, the protagonist, she's lying in an old rickety house in Missouri, and she's looking at a crack in the ceiling, kind of going nowhere. And that's kind of the lead-in metaphor into her life. It's really, that book is really about perseverance and then ultimately finding your calling and following your calling, the Lord's calling. Any others? These are great questions. Yes. It's all set, actually there's a scene in New York City. It starts in 1933 and it jumps back to 1928, which the publishers tried to get me to change, and I actually flipped it at one point just to appease them. And they said, you're right, it worked better the other way, because that was kind of an unconventional thing to do. But it is all told in Paris and Provence, Roussillon, the area down there. And there's definitely, it revolves around her as an artist, but really that story also has a huge theme thread of forgiveness. There's brothers that are very important in that book. All of my books also have a love relationship. And I've had people say, well, are you a romance writer? And I said, I'm not a romance writer. I am a writer that writes love stories into her stories. So, okay, anyone else? Well, this is truly, I really can't thank you enough. And it was kind of a funny thing. Penny, who was going to come, a friend of mine, she and I have spoken at a lot of conferences together. We cheer each other on with our writing. We try to hold each other accountable to write. We've tried to get together to write, but then we end up talking because we have so much fun together. But she, like you said, was unable to come, and it was truly just God's blessing that this all worked out, and for my mom to get to come back and see her friends at her church. She was so excited. She probably hardly slept last night. But it really has been my pleasure, and I really do encourage you to take a flag. Oh, there's also these little, I forgot to mention this real quickly, those little Himalayan salts. There's a scripture on the back, and it is about, I'll read it to you. This will be our ending note here. So it's Colossians 4:6. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. So that's why those little bags are there. So please help yourself to those, and thank you so, so much.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Yeah, will you be here around the table at the end if anybody wants to talk to you? Okay, great. One of the things that stuck out to me about what you said was love knows no age. And in this time of COVID, and it can be sometimes easy to go when we reach a certain age or a certain life stage, am I forgotten? Like, do people see me? Am I still known? And when we're isolated, it makes it even more of a question and more of a thing that's on our minds. And we just want you to know as a church here, you are not forgotten, that we see you, that we love you, and that most importantly, the Lord sees you. One of my favorite verses, Deuteronomy 31:6, and also repeated, I think, in Hebrews 11 or 12, when the Lord says, I will never leave you or forsake you. And that's just an amazing verse, and may that be what we remember as we move forward into this day, into this week as well. So yeah, would you just stand as we close? This has been something I think we've done for a number of times as a group here, but We will end just in a time of singing the doxology together. One more real quick thing. If you could keep the tables and chairs where they are. We're going to be setting up for Sunday school tomorrow, so those do not need to be moved or torn down or anything, okay? All right, let's sing the doxology together. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise him, all creatures here below. Praise him above, ye heavenly host. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Amen. Love you guys. Have a great rest of your day. Blessings.